Hello everyone, and welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk cube and other magical goodness. I'm your host Dan, better known on the internet as 2SweetMTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. How's it going, dude? Are you prepped and ready for today?
I am not as prepped as I need to be. There are so many magic cards in this set that look very, very cubable.
No, definitely. Well, today is our first installment of our cube review for Modern Horizons 3. I say the word installment because, as James has mentioned, there's a lot of cards for us to get to. The way we're going to be doing this is that in this episode, we're going to be talking about the blue and the white cards. The next episode, we'll be going over black and red. Then we'll look at green and multicolored. Then in episode 4, we're doing colorless and lands. And finally, we'll wrap things up with our fifth part, where we talk about the commander cards and give our thoughts on the set overall. We're doing it this way, one, because my computer can't handle 2 8-hour raw WAV files, and 2, because neither can my voice. We'll be recording these as quickly as possible and aim to get these out to everyone as soon as possible. But honestly, there's just so many cool cards in this set, we wanted to make sure that we did it justice. I think from like a raw numbers point of view, this is double what a previous set that we've spoken about is. And the thing with these Modern Horizons sets is that in the past, they have just been so impactful to so many formats, like especially in Cube. Like I was looking at it, like around 7% of the Mitgo Vintage Cube is made up of cards from Modern Horizons 1 and 2. Which is ridiculous and probably more than like Alpha, just in terms of like impact. James, what have your thoughts on Modern Horizons set so far been?
I think so. There's sort of multiple issues to discuss with the whole Modern Horizons thing. There's their impact on Modern, which I think you could say in a lot of ways has been positive. I think the gameplay is maybe better than it has been in the past, certainly more interactive. But also the format very much feels like Modern Horizons block constructed, and we're about to get a rotation, and that is not really what Modern is meant to be. It is meant to be the place you can go and play your old standard cards, and that feels like it certainly hasn't been the case since Modern Horizons was a thing. Outside of Modern, the draft formats have tended to be really cool. Certainly the first Modern Horizons one, I think, was great. To do some cool storm stuff. That was awesome. Impact on Cube, the one we're really interested in. Some real heavy hitters. Certainly some power level outliers, but I think that's if you're building your cube to have the maximum power level, you've got to be okay with that. And if you're not, then you can just pick the cards you want. It doesn't mean that you have to put the 10 most powerful cards we talk about in these set reviews into your cube. You can pick and choose the cards that give you the gameplay experience you want. And I think there are some really cool cards in this set. I think specifically one thing they seem to be doing is a lot of like interesting callbacks, which I think is quite cool. Like there's a kind of fixed quote unquote Aloran, there's a fixed recurring nightmare, there's some cool, and those cards are really interesting, and like having a new variation on them, which isn't like strictly worse as well, is I think pretty interesting.
There's also 3 Mog Fanatics duct taped together, which
3 Mog Fanatics in a trench coat. Yes.
Exactly. No, exactly. I'm all here for that. With all that being said, worth mentioning that we are comparing in this set review. We are comparing every card in the set to every card ever printed in the history of Magic. We're also generally looking at the set from a more standard cube environment, so things like Pauper, Peasant, Unpowered, Powered, and Budget-type cubes. Not so much more niche type of cubes. So we don't mention a card that's not because it's bad, it's more we don't think it's going to see play in a wider range of cubes. In this set as well, there are a lot of returning mechanics. Specifically, Energy, I think, is a great example of something that I did want to touch on. At the moment, even with this set, for example, Energy isn't a fully established archetype in cube. With the set review, we'll be talking about the cards and how they work on their own. So if we talk about an energy card, we're talking about how it functions by itself, not so much in a full archetype supporting it. That's kind of how we'll be doing it with the majority of mechanics, because that's how they will actually see play in the largest variety of cubes. We are actually thinking of doing a episode on energy and those kind of mechanics later on, so make sure you follow the podcast so you get notified when that comes out. James, with all that out of the way, do you want to take it away with our first card of the day?
Sure, we have an absolute banger right out of the gate. First up, we have Ajani Nakatal Pariah. This is 1 white for a 1/2 legendary creature cat warrior. When Ajani Nakatal Pariah enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 white cat warrior creature token. And whenever one or more other cats you control die, you may exile Ajani, then return him to a battlefield transformed under his owner's control. He returns transformed as Ajani Nakatal Avenger. This is a planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty counters. It has +2 to put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. 0 to create a 2/1 white cat warrior creature token. When you do, if you control a red permanent other than Ajani Nakatal Avenger, he deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target. And -4, each opponent chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. In terms of a ratio of words to mana cost, I feel like this must be an all-timer. But those words do add up to a hell of a lot of power in this case. So base level, you're paying 2 mana for a 1/2 and a 2/1. That's fine, it's not great. But the Planeswalker we flip into is really, really impactful here, and it's not hard to get there. Even if you don't have any red permanents, just 0 to make make a 2/1 every turn, and then +2 to buff them all. Given how early you can get this flipped, that's going to run away with some games. It's not hard to get to the -4, which is a sort of Cataclysm variant thing, which is going to be situationally really powerful. And the flip condition is so easy. You get your 2/1 cat, you just have to attack with it, jump with it, whatever you need to do. And you get your Planeswalker. You can get it so quickly. And there will be times when it is correct to just bolt the cat, you know?
As a proud cat dad, I am shocked by all that.
Sometimes you need to kill the cat.
James.
Sometimes you need to kill that. What's quite nice as well, right, is if, because they're going to be scared of your Ajani and they're not going to want to attack into the cat, they'll point a removal spell at the Ajani. And then if you kill the cat in response, then their removal spell fizzles and you just get your Planeswalker. I mean, I think the actual dream is you go turn 1 Skull Clamp, turn 2 play this, turn 3 you clamp the cat and get an Ajani and draw 2 cards.
You can do it even before that, just or with a Viscera Seer or a Carrion Feeder.
Yeah.
There are plenty of single mana,
Yeah, but I want to draw my cards, Daniel.
No, I know. But at a base level, this is 1 card for 2 bodies for that 2 mana that makes you more. So it's this does also fit in an aristocratic stylish show, and in those you could have an active Planeswalker on turn 2.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that is where it's at its best, is in aristocrats, because aristocrats will also fairly frequently be red, so you get the damage off the 0, which is a really big deal. It will generally be quite wide, so that damage will be quite a high number. And obviously you can proactively kill the cat and get this flipped really quickly, which is probably the biggest thing. So if you have this in your deck, even if you're not a full-on sacrifice deck, I think having 1 or 2 sack outlets goes up in value. Even stuff that isn't a sack outlet, but stuff an Orcish Bowmasters, you can ping your cat, and it's very low cost. It's not like you're burning a whole card just to do it. But really, even if you don't do any work, I think this card is quite strong.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I like both sides of the Ajani. The other thing I think might be worth mentioning is, while I would not recommend going full cat type all matters in your cube, kind of if you are running this, I'd personally consider if you're running something like an Adeline, replace that with the original Brimaz, just so that there is some cool synergy that you can do with it. But yeah, it is because it flips whenever any cat dies, not just the one that you have made. So if you can replace a card you already have in your cube with a similar cat version, then maybe consider it just for some cool synergies for your cube. But yeah. Apart from that, you don't really need much synergy with this card. It just put it in with other creatures and spells and stuff, and you will get a Planeswalker pretty easily with this. And yeah, it'll be quite good.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Right, let's move on to our next white card. Next up, we have Charitable Levy. It is 1 white for an enchantment. Non-creature spells cost 1 generic more to cast, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, put a collection counter on Charitable Levy. Then if there are 3 or more collection counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do, draw a card, then you may search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And also importantly, this is an uncommon. So this does seem like a solid bit of value. So I don't think this is one for white aggro, because at 2 you kind of just want creatures. It's more if you're kind of supporting like a death and taxes style of thing in Peasant. You're trying to slow your opponents down. The fact that you can't control when it sacks itself, it does it automatically once it's got the 3 counters on it, might actually be really annoying. Kind of like if this is stopping your opponent double spelling a number of turns in the game, then that could be quite helpful. If you play this and you are able to slow down your opponent a couple of turns, and then you effectively get 2 cards off of it, you get a card off the top of your library and you get a Plains into play tapped. That's pretty good value for 1 card. You also don't get this effect often in Peasant, so for those environments, I think I would test this, but at a higher power level cube, I mean, we have Thalia for a reason, like, it also attacks and blocks, but like, you don't get that as much at Peasant, so that's kind of one of the reasons I thought this was worth talking about.
Yeah, no, it's worth talking about for sure, but I think there is the thing of death and taxes does need for death. You do kind of need to be killing them a little bit. Even when, like, restricting their mana is good, but it's hard to tax their mana so much that, like, you're not outpacing in the long term. You're not going to draw more taxation effects than they are going to draw lands to pay for your taxation effects, right? I think the time the deck works well is when it's applying pressure at the same time, and it can keep them off casting whatever they need to cast to stabilize just long enough to get them dead. And this doesn't contribute towards the getting them dead side of it. Whereas, you know, something like a Galio or like a Leonian Relic Warder or whatever, disrupting their mana, does. Those cards like, you know, the 2/2 body looks kind of mopey on Relic Warder, but it is actually important. And I think mostly for that reason, I'm not quite seeing the home for this. And yeah, it is annoying that, you know, if you run into the matchup where this is insane, right? You play against Storm or whatever. I don't know if you can play Storm in Peasant, but they just need to cast 3 spells into it and then it goes away. And that's kind of unfortunate.
Point, they've spent 3 extra mana, and then you get 2 cards off it. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think it's fantastic. And yes, I do agree you do need to kill your opponents. And I don't think this is a do-nothing enchantment, because at the minimum, it'll cycle slowly. But no, yeah. Interesting one, though. Thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, for sure.
The next one is a part of a new cycle that I think could be quite impactful. Do you want to take it away with our next white card, James?
Yeah, for sure. Next up, we have Flare of Fortitude. This is 2 white for an instant. However, you may sacrifice a non-token white creature rather than pay this spell's mana costs. There's a whole cycle of these flares, and they all have that text. There's a blue one that sacks a non-token blue creature, etc., etc. This one, you sack a non-token white creature. And it says, until end of turn, your life total can't change, and permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. Yeah, this is very powerful. Okay, 3 spells are busted is the first thing. And this is like very powerful protection. And pretty flexible. Like, listen, this sort of card is always inherently situational, right? You can certainly play games of Magic where this isn't really properly good at any point in the game, right? You play against a combo deck that is just going over the top of you and killing you in some other way than just reducing your life total to 0, like they're milling you out or whatever. Yes, isn't really going to do anything. But in the majority of games, you will find a spot that this will be really good. You can countering a sweeper with this is great. Countering a removal spell with this can be good, but assuming you haven't left up your 4 mana, you're sacrificing a non-token white creature. Non-token means it's probably a fairly real creature. Like, your best case is you're sacking, a Thraben Inspector or something very cheap that gave you value on the way in. But you say the mid case is like you're sacrificing like an okay 2-drop. That means the creature you're saving has to be has to be really good, because it has to be worth your okay 2-drop plus the card from your hand. But hopefully you do have good creatures in your deck, and protecting those can be strong. And then on top of that, you have this kind of awesome fog mode. Like, fog is not a card that you should put in your decks, but that's because there are too many games where it's bad, but that doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of games where it's fantastic. Like, you will just run into spots not that infrequently where you and your opponent both have a pretty big board. They like kill one of your things, attack you with all their creatures. You just cast this, don't die, and kill them on the crackback. That's not a particularly difficult situation to have happen. And these are all situational things that I'm describing, but I think it is broad enough and covers enough of those cases that it is probably a card you should main deck, would be my guess. A couple of things to just be aware of. They can kill your planeswalkers with damage, because if they attack your planeswalkers have indestructible, but that doesn't stop them dying to not having any counters on them.
Right, okay.
And the counters can still be removed by damage. That's kind of unfortunate, just a thing you have to bear in mind. But obviously, if you have blockers up, your blockers will have indestructible, so that's okay. There's also stuff like, one of the most commonly played sweepers in Cube is Toxic Deluge, and it's kind of annoying that it doesn't work against that. Because obviously -X will beat indestructible. But with those caveats, yeah, I think the card is pretty good. At worst, it is an excellent sideboard card. I think my guess is you're meant to main deck this most of the time. So this was with the caveat that you need to have a decent amount of cheap creatures in your deck. You can't be reliably leaving up 4 mana for this, and you certainly don't want to be sacrificing your Hero of Bladehold to counter a removal spell. That's not a profitable exchange. But if you have a low curve of cheap creatures, hopefully some of them are your Thraben Inspector type stuff that gave you value on the way in, then I think this card can be pretty good.
No, fair. So, well, being honest, so I agree with everything you said about if this card is in your deck, it'll be good and how you play it and such. My issue is more specifically with this for Cube. I actually think this is the worst of the Flare cycle, specifically for Cube, just because I don't think this is an effect that Cubes necessarily want. Like, we've had Teferi's Protection available to us for a number of years now, and I've never heard anyone run it. The closest that I think we've run is like Unbreakable Formation. That's 2 and a white for an instant against creatures you control, indestructible end of turn. But if you play it on your main phase, they also get +1/+1 and gain Vigilance. So that's kind of does double duty. That's the protection spell, but it also can win you the game in the mono white deck. I can very much imagine this like there's a lot of times when this will be super impactful, but I just don't think I want to put this in a cube. I don't know if that's wrong, but like I'm very open to being wrong on that. But kind of like as a slot in a cube, as a card type that I want to run in a cube, that I want people to like kind of like the. When is it? If it gets in a deck, it'll be very good, and I'm sure people will test it, and probably quite rightly so. But my over under on this card is that it's not the type of card that you necessarily want, if that makes sense.
So I do know where you're coming from with this, but I also think it is kind of a fundamentally pretty different thing from Teferi's Protection and Unbreakable Formation and the like. And the reason is that this effect is, there will often be a turn in the game where this effect will be really good, but you don't know in advance when that turn is going to be. And you probably haven't passed with your 3 mana up for your Teferi's Protection, right? You can't just keep doing that every turn. Yeah, whereas this being free is like, if this is in your opening hand and you have a bunch of cheap creatures and they have a Supreme Verdict in their opening hand, but this is trading for that Supreme Verdict, basically, right?
It's effectively kind of a counterspell for a board wipe or something like that, I guess. Yeah,
but you don't have to like leave anything up on the right turn, right? You're just
No, that's true. Yeah, like free spells, like that's the thing. The last Modern Horizon set really kind of hammered home that free spells are kind of broken, and the fact the whole flare cycle is instant. I'm very open to being wrong on this, and I know people will run it, and Yeah, to be fair, like it's a Modern Horizons card. Maybe I should just test it, but
I'm not like supine. I don't think it's like an auto include for every cube or anything. But I think like if it's in your cube and you're playing a low curve white creature deck, I'd probably put it in my deck.
I think I might be jumping ahead tiering these, but I think this might be my either least favorite or second least favorite of the Flare cycle.
Okay.
But we'll get to them all. Don't you worry. All right. Next up, we have Glimph Elemental. It is 1 white for enchantment creature elemental. It is a 2/2, but it also has Bestow for 1 white. So as a reminder, you can cast this card for its Bestow cost. It becomes an aura spell with enchant creature. It becomes a creature again if it ever is not attached. So if the creature it's attached to dies at any point, it will just fall off and become a creature. Glyph Elemental also has landfall. Put a +1/+1 counter onto the creature. And then when it's enchanted, it gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 for each counter on Glyph Elemental. So landfall to put on a creature is pretty solid, like especially in Peasant. Obviously, it's better in cubes with fetch lands, which is unfortunate as you don't get as many in Peasant Cube. But I've heard of plenty of people break rarity for lands in Peasant Cube, so if you're doing that, that can definitely be a thing. To be happy with this, I think you want to put it on a creature with evasion already. Like if you put this on a Healer's Hawk, then you're kind of gaming, I think. Seems like a pretty solid card. Like as it, yeah, definitely gets better in cubes where you're doing enchantments and also +1/+1 counters. Those are things that you do see in Peasant Cubes. Like I've played in Peasant Cubes where there's kind of like a landy style aggro deck. There's like boggles, that kind of stuff. Like this kind of and also kind of like enchantress style stuff in blue white. Kind of like it just feels like it does enough and gives you enough flexibility that like this. I think people will definitely be testing this in Peasant.
Yeah, no, I can see it. Yeah, sticking this on the Evasive creature seems pretty good, especially as there are now more quote-unquote fetch lands available in Peasant with, like, they called hideouts from Streets of New Capenna. The ones where it's like they enter and then you go and get one of the 3 types. It's like Broker's hideout and whatnot.
And there's actually another 10 in this set actually as well.
Yeah, so and obviously those let you double up on the landfall triggers, but it's pretty nice.
And there's a third Evolving Wilds now as well, actually, which I still haven't got around to buying or putting one in my cube yet, but
right.
Such is life.
Yeah. The other thing to mention, just for people who haven't played with Bestow much before, Bestow is quite generous with the way it works rules-wise.
Yeah, it works exactly as you want it to.
Yeah,
you don't get got with it.
You can't get blown out really with Bestow. Like by which I mean, if you try and bestow this onto your Healer's Hawk and they kill the Healer's Hawk in response, this will just enter the battlefield as a creature, and it'll be a slightly worse than if it was on the Healer's Hawk, but you're okay with it. Yeah, Bestow powerful.
No, definitely, and with this creature is just jumping back to it, kind of like the fact that it will keep the counters. The counters aren't on the creature; they're on the enchantment. Is also quite nice. So if they do kill the creature, you'll still have all your hard work will still have been kept with it. But I quite like this card.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, energy is back, James. You want to take it away with our first energy card of the day?
Sure is. Next up, we have Guide of Souls. This is a single white mana for a 1/2 creature human cleric. It has whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and get an energy. And whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target's attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types. So this has some upside for sure. So let's say we're doing like base case, you have like no real synergies other than you're playing lots of creatures. If you play this on turn 1, it seems like it does quite a lot for you, right? Because you're probably gonna get, if they don't kill it, at least 1 activation out of that. You know, you're making some tokens, you're doing some good stuff, getting lots of triggers. Great, we're happy with that. But it is very sort of feast or famine, right? Like if you basically don't have this on turn 1, it feels like, you know, you might not find a good time to play it for a couple of turns, and then it's going to be doing very, very little for you. So don't love that. But it does the Soul Sisters thing, It gains you
does it, yes.
when a creature enters. That's good. We like that. There are cubes that want that effect. And this does a bunch of extra stuff for you as well. It is a soul sister that also helps you kill them. And that's pretty strong. And that's ignoring the what if you're actually supporting energy in your cube. If you're actually supporting energy in your cube, this seems great. Like it's a pretty good way to spend your energy and a really good way to make energy for your other stuff. So yeah, I'd say like you need a reason to put it in your cube, but it does a variety. It synergizes with a few different things pretty well. Like I think you can just be like, I'm supporting life gain and I want this. I don't know. You have to be about energy.
No, definitely. Kind of like for me, this is definitely one of the cards that like that could say like get a divinity counter or a feather counter, and just the fact that this is like the best soul sister they've ever printed means that it could just still see play. Like yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with it, which is like it's a soul sister, but kind of the biggest issue with soul sisters is that they are single mana 1/1s that gain you some life, and you need to draft a whole other deck with them to make them work. Whereas, like with this, it's like it has the issue of the soul sister of like if you draw it late, it's not going to do anything. But like unlike a soul sister, if you just draw this and nothing else in kind of synergizes with it in terms of life gain stuff, this can just still it can at least like push your game plan forward. Like this becoming a 3/4. Okay, that's not like the best thing in the world, but it's better than just it being like a 1/1 for the whole game. Like yeah. Personally, I think this is like. This does need kind of like some kind of life gain synergies, which are like there's been so many sets where kind of like black white this set is life gain. I've never really tried it in cube, partly because the pieces you need to run for it aren't fantastic, and those are like soul sisters. And this card, yeah, I could see myself like at some point trying white black life gain, and kind of this would be a corner post to it because yeah, it's the best soul sister they've ever printed, I think.
I mean, there is some upside in the original Soul, like Soul Warden counts their creatures, whereas this doesn't. So it's not like strictly better, but I agree. I think it is better because it gives you something else productive to do with that if you don't have like stuff triggering off your life gain or whatever. I would say for me, the biggest issue with Soul Sisters is that I only remember like 50% of the triggers in paper, but you know, that's a me problem.
It's one for Arena, James. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on now. Next up, we have Ocelot Pride. This is a single white for a 1/1 creature cat with First Strike, Lifelink, and Ascend, which, if you don't remember what that was, that is, if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Once you have it, you have just ascended. Don't worry about it. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then if you have the city's blessing, for each token you control that enter the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. So, I guess this is another card for the new Ajani. I do like this card, and I see a lot of upside for it, but it does have issues. Firstly, being this is a mythic, and it'll probably be really expensive. That's probably one of the main issues. I did just see the pre-order price of this is $45, James.
Get wrecked.
I think, to be fair, it was spoiled like 3 hours ago at time of recording, but here we are. So hopefully that price will come down a bit. So I'm going to say I like this card, but the issue is I'm comparing it to a card like Legion's Landing, which I immediately think is better, but let's ignore that for the time being. So this, like most mythics on this set, if it needs to be answered, otherwise it will start snowballing. There's a chance this could be a little snow, like math-wise. If you're just playing a creature on a land every turn, you're not going to be doubling tokens until like turn 4 or 5, because this does have to attack as well to trigger the lifelink, that kind of stuff, to gain you life, unless you have some kind of life gain trigger. This with a Rabble Master or other tokens makers is where it gets a little bit scarier. You will be making so many bodies at that point that you could just get the city's blessing the turn you play it if you draw it late game. That's pretty good. So I think for this to be good, you need to be supporting tokens in Boros, and you also probably need other ways of gaining life, or for this to reliably not die in combat, and it is just a 1/1. So yeah, the fact that this would be really expensive, and Legion's Landing and Usher of the Fallen might just be better Magic cards might be the biggest issue with this. But I like this card. It's cool. Again, nothing to do with being proud cat father. What do you think? I want to like this card, James, but it might just be a little slow, or am I missing something with this?
I think this is pretty powerful, actually.
Good.
You compared it to Legion's Landing. I think this is way better than Legion's Landing. I kind of think that card sucks, actually. But I think this is a lot better from Legion's Landing. Because Legion's Landing, even when you get it flipped, it requires you to put mana into it to get bodies. And this just sits there and does its thing. I do really want some life gain enablers of some sort, though. Like, you're not reliably... I think, like, you play this on the play on turn 1, you're probably, like, getting one hit in fine. But most of the time, you're not reliably just going to be able to knock in with your 1/1 lifelinker. But it's not hard to have a little bit of life gain scattered around your deck. And it's people just make tokens, you know? There's enough cards in Magic that create tokens for you. I think for 1 mana, you're going to get your money's worth out of this card. I'm not saying I'm necessarily putting it in, like, you know, my cube, there's like not really any supported synergy for it. But if I was doing any sort of life gain stuff, or I was really pushing tokens, I think this would be like a slam dunk, you know?
I definitely think, like, yeah, like, I guess the argument of it is just 1 mana. It is very efficient. It's a lot of text for a 1 mana card.
Exactly. You can. It's also pretty good, right, if you can just buff its power or give it evasion in some way, like it plays well with equipment. Also, once you get it going, then you start skull clamping the tokens. Oh,
yeah, makes sense. And yeah, white does have plenty of other creatures that, like, with lifelink, I guess. So that might be another little way of, yeah, getting the counters on it, or triggering that life gain. So that's pretty good.
Also, incidentally, turn 1 Guide of Souls, turn 2 this is going to be pretty nice.
Which one's Guided Souls, Jay?
Guide of Souls, we talked about it 2 minutes
literally
ago.
The last card.
Yes.
I don't know what they're called yet. I know the pretty pictures, James. Nice. Fair enough.
All right, next up we have Felia, Exuberant Shepherd. This is 1 white for a 2/2 legendary creature dog. Definite good boy. Yeah.
This is the best pupper of the set, easily.
Oh yeah, not close. It has Flash, it's a surprising pupper. And whenever Felia Exuberant Shepherd attacks, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. At the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it entered under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Felia. This card's pretty cool, I think. That effect has quite a lot of different utility in different situations, I think. And it's a 2/2 flash, so it's like, you know, they don't necessarily know it's coming. It's like passable stats. And so the effects, like, obviously sort of the best case, the thing you're planning to do with it probably most of the time is you blink out one of your permanents and re-trigger an ETB or get some value that way. But it's very nice as well that and that grows your Felia, so it makes it easier for Felia to be able to keep attacking. But it's quite nice as well that if they say you have like 3 small creatures and they have 1 big creature blanking all your attacks, you can just flicker that out to keep pushing damage. That's really nice. It also just kills their tokens dead. If they have somehow gained control of one of your permanents, if they've cast a treachery on your creature, you just flicker that out, get through, and it will return under your control in the next end step. That's great. You can even do stuff like resetting planeswalkers. That certainly has some utility. Actually works really nicely with the Wandering Emperor, right? If you flicker, you can activate your Wandering Emperor, flicker it out, it comes back in your end step, you get another activation right away. That's kind of cool.
I know it's a good card, but I hate the Wandering Emperor. All my opponents seem to always have either the bloody Wandering Emperor or the 4 mana exile all your creatures thing. It's like, just let me attack.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We don't want people attacking. Oh, come on. Yeah, for me, I think that adds up to being a pretty powerful card. The challenge here is you have to have ways to get stuff out of the way to get your attacks in, because you don't really want to be like every turn just flicker your blocker out of the way, right? And it is only a 2/2. There's no sort of evasion. and on a built-out board, it will struggle to be able to get an attack in. But so I think it's good to have some removal to go with it to clear blockers out of the way. But I think if this lives and gets some attacks in, it's going to do some work for you.
No, definitely. Just the fact it's 2 mana. It's really cheap. It seems really flexible, and just I'll be honest with you, I'd be perfectly happy just flickering a 3-mana Inspector every turn.
Oh yeah, great value.
Like that's just great, and like that's like the first cheapest creature I could come up with. Like, there's so many other good ETB effects in Magic that you can just retrigger with this, and it also, because this is a Modern Horizon card, it keeps getting the counters. It's not like it'll only ever get 1 counter and stay that way. This could in theory growing throughout the game. Like White Tarmogoyf James? No. There'll probably be one in the set somewhere, but no, yeah. Failure, very good little doggy. We love it. Right, next up we have White Orchid Phantom. It is white and a white for a 2/2 creature spirit knight. It has flying, first strike. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So, mana bases are just getting more and more greedy, and I've seen plenty of decks where splash colors aren't on basic lands. They're on like a couple of triomes, that kind of thing. And on top of that, we have the very broken older lands that a lot of cubes are running, like your Tolarian Academies, your Cradles, etc. Like, I think this could have a place there. Like most cubes in terms of their land destruction really only want things like Strip Mine and Wasteland. Like there aren't really too many ones that are consistently run on top of that. Like the fact that you get that flexibility on top of quite a good body, like 2/2 first strike flying, is just very solid. And like the double white is slightly harder to cast, but I'm kind of fine with the aggro deck having to work a little bit for its mana base. I really like this card. Like I'm not going to say staple because that's kind of hard to say with any card nowadays because there's always a new shiny toy. But I think this is actually pretty solid. Like I think if you have this in your cube, mono white will love it, and it will just be a good annoying creature that can win you the game. Basically, like is this kind of the Death and Taxes style card you were talking about when I was trying to make you play do nothing enchantment James earlier?
Yes, it's exactly that.
I see. Okay.
2 power, flying first strike. We like it. Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with all that. I think there's going to be a decent amount of matchups where like you just blow that triumph on turn 1 and they can be like, oh, I can't get all of my colors like my opening hand, and it does enough coming along with a pretty acceptable body. Also worth noting that if the situation requires it, you can target your own land. So like say you have like a plains and a white producing non-basic, and you need to go and get your other color, you can just blow up that non-basic and go and get your other color. That's fine. There's also potential for some synergy there, specifically if you're running the cycle of indestructible artifact dual lands. If you target your indestructible land with this, the land won't die, but you will still get your rampant growth. Which is kind of cute. Yeah.
That's pretty hot, actually. I like that. Yeah. Okay, nice.
Yeah, because it doesn't say if a land is destroyed this way, you just target the land, the trigger resolves, right? It just doesn't actually kill the land. So yeah, that's kind of good. And a similar deal with like if you're running like Flagstones of Troccar, but that's kind of a niche card for cube, I guess.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. White Orchid Phantom seems like sometimes cards don't have to be super fancy. Sometimes they can just be good and efficient, and that is one of the things with Modern Horizons that we see. So awesome.
Yes, for sure. More of those cards, please. We don't all need 5 paragraphs of text.
All right, James, do you want to take it away with our first modal double face card of the day?
Heading off the rant at source there. James is going to go off another one of those rants. Let's move quickly on. Next up, we have Witch Enchanter. Witch Enchanter is a 4 mana for a 2/2 creature human warlock at uncommon. And when Witch Enchanter enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Why are we talking about this 4 mana card for cube, you will say? Because it's also a land. This is a MDFC. You can play it on the back side as Witch Blessed Meadow, which is a land that taps for white mana. And as it enters the battlefield, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. This is really solid. MDFCs are great. They just let you increase your land count to hit your land drops more consistently without getting flooded too much, because this is, it's obviously isn't a spell you would play in your deck, but it is a spell that will do stuff in most cubes. Obviously, if there aren't a bunch of artifacts or enchantments in your cube, then probably don't run this, but in a lot of cubes that are, this will be an relatively impactful thing you can do with your land in the late game. Having a couple of MDFCs in your deck, it kind of works similarly to the thing of I have 1 less land, but I have 2 cantrips that can find me lands or spells when I draw them, right? It just smooths out your draw a little bit. You get flooded less, you get screwed less.
No, definitely. And just the fact that kind of all of the monocolored ones that are uncommon in this set have the ability to come into play untapped is really big. Like, when we first saw them in either one of the Zendikar sets or Kaldheim, I can't remember which one came first, but the uncommon ones all came into play tapped. Obviously, this is Modern Horizons. Let's push things a bit, but like the fact, it's just so free to run. And kind of like this, like high power level cubes want this kind of effect in them, and like I know 4 mana is a lot, but the fact that it is effectively free to run in your deck, because it's a land that can come into play untapped. Like I know 3 mana is a lot, but
3 life is quite a lot. Like it's not. But I think it is. Yeah, I don't see cutting this for many white decks. I will say, I think if you play against very aggressive red aggro, you should probably side this card out and just play planes. Unless you're just okay with it being a tap land because you don't have a ton of 1 mana plays. But you're not going to want to. There are matchups where you don't want to bolt yourself, right? And that is just something to be aware of. But yeah, I think that's really good.
I guess if you haven't seen a good target for it, because I'm not sure, does the Vintage Cube still run? What's the double strikey sword, for example? From that face, I'm guessing no. Embercleave.
Oh, sure.
No, but yeah, but like if you see a mono deck running like I don't know Fable or Self-Curate Vortex or something like that,
true.
Then but that's the thing. Like it's a Rex Sage that's also a land in white. Like I think it's very solid card.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, we have a common next. Next up, we have Wing It. It is 1 white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and put a flying counter on it. Scry 1. So normally we don't really talk about just combat tricks in Cube because we have access to all the spells, unless they're kind of super busted and can win you the game. Something like the Big Delve one, we don't really talk about them. But kind of like the permanent flying buff on this is really good, actually. Like I am aiming like Pauper and maybe Peasant at best with this. Like this is not getting into higher powered level cubes unless you're specifically doing something that's super cares about combat tricks, kind of like the Feather, the Redeem, that kind of stuff. But like, just the fact that if this can win you a combat, or even better, surprise block a flying creature, and then it just sets you up for the rest of the game to make your best creature have flying for the rest of the game, and that's kind of how you win. Like with most combat tricks, as I mentioned, it does need to be in a cube where kind of combat tricks are good, and that tends to be either lower power level ones or one built more about combat. But as common combat tricks go, I think this is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, rest in peace, Mighty Leap. You've indeed been power crapped. This is, as 2 mana combat tricks go, this is a good one. Because it also has the mode, right, of you will cast this sorcery speed more than you will with most combat tricks, because it has the mode of I have a 5/5 on the ground, you have 7 life and no flyers, you are now dead. And that's nice flexibility to have. It does what it does very well. If you want a trick, like the thing is, there is a big difference between 1 and 2 mana with combat tricks, because the 1 mana ones are really good at like the time combat tricks feel great, right? Is when you're like, you play a 3-drop on turn 3, turn 4, you attack for your 3-drop, pay 1 mana to win the combat, and play another 3-drop. And it's just harder to have those like really, really good multi-spell turns. But the flying being permanent, I think, does kind of make up for that. Like that feels like you've properly upgraded your threat. I think the card's solid. All right, well, that will do it for white. Moving on to our first blue card of the day. Joke, it isn't actually blue. We have Emrakul's Messenger. It is 1 blue for a 2/1 flying, but it has Devoid. So this card has no color. It also has, whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature to add a colorless mana. This is solid. Probably one for peasant or just lower power level cubes in general, but there's not a lot wrong with it. It's a cheap, evasive creature, and you don't have to try very hard in blue to trigger this effect. You're going to draw some extra cards. And this gives you either chump blockers or the ability to ramp, and both of those things you tend to be interested in. And it's a nice combination, right? Gumming up the ground and getting in for damage in the air is a tried and tested strategy. The only reason I say probably not one for higher power level, like, there's nothing wrong with the card. There's just a bunch of options, and is this better than Malcolm? Probably not. Is it better than the Nathan Stoyer Invitational card, whatever that's called? Probably not. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with this card. It's really solid. It does a lot of things you'd be interested in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. At Rare, we're kind of at the point where we already have slightly too many to run in like large cubes, and this is definitely one for peasant, I think. But just they're printing more and more cards that reward you for drawing your second card each turn. So it's while it's not like the thing that blue is doing, it's very easy to see a world where you just have a number of cards that let you do that or reward you when you do that. And the fact that this effectively makes it's an OG treasure token. It can help you cast the spells that you're drawing. So yeah, very solid, very cool. Try it out in your peasant cubes. All right, I think we might be higher on the next one. Next up, we have Flare of Denial. This is 1 blue for an instant. You may sacrifice a non-token blue creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Counter target spell. So we have another free blue counter spell here, which at a baseline is also just a 3 mana hard counter, and that is just really good. I know a lot of blue decks aren't traditionally playing to the board as much, which means this could be one for more of like a tempo style deck than just your regular like hard control deck that's only really playing planeswalkers, and like the only creature it'll run is like a land that becomes a creature, or like a Thassa bests the sea god, that kind of thing. Which probably means that this is closer to days than something like Force of Will. But I think that's fine. We don't really run cancels in Powered Cube, but a cancel that can be free is just really, really good. There'll be times where you pay 3 mana for this, and you will be countering more than 3 mana's worth of mana, and you will just be fine doing that. But obviously, it has the upside of just being able to free. You pass with no mana, counter target spell. It's another one along the lines of Days, Force of Will, Force of Negation that we have to now consider, and players have to play around. And just having more of them makes them all the more scarier. So yeah, slam dunk in any cube that can run or afford it, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly very powerful. I think of all the flares, this has the best effect, but blue is the worst color for the text. You may sacrifice a non-token creature rather than pay its mana cost, right? The saving grace, as you say, is that it's pretty achievable to just hardcast this. Like, obviously, it's not where you wouldn't put it in your deck if you could only hardcast it, but you will do that. I would say, can imagine in a lot of decks being close to like 50-50, maybe even you hardcast it more. And that's maybe still okay. But yeah, it is. You won't put it in all of your blue decks. You need to have non-token creatures that you're okay to sacrifice. And we spoke before, like, this is a powerful enough effect that it's you don't have to feel really bad if you sacrifice a quote-unquote proper creature, right? Like, we've been happily 2-for-1ing ourselves with Force of Will for many years. It is okay. The downside here, of course, is you're not just 2-for-1ing yourself in terms of card advantage, you're also putting yourself behind on board because you're sacrificing a creature. But, cubes, especially high power level cubes, like the spells you want to counter with this are so swingy. Like, if you tap out for your Jason Mind Sculptor and then counter for free their Minsk and Boo, say, just picking some generic high power level 4-mana plays. That will win you the game, and you'll be okay that you sacrificed your like Malcolm or whatever that you played on turn 2. But yeah, I think it's good. I don't think it's great, just because I think there are enough blue decks that don't want it, or where it will be kind of mediocre, because there's just a lot of times you're not going to meet this criteria of having a non-token blue creature.
Very fair. I'm looking at my cube, and blue is the lowest creature count by a significant margin. It's like 5 less than black and half of what green is.
Yeah.
So I think, that kind of sums up that issue, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. Yeah, 23 creatures in blue, 41 in green. It is a big difference. But yeah, I think 3 counter spells are busted. We know this. If you do have a decent number of cheap blue creatures, take this, play this. It will be great.
Worth mentioning, because I was Googling this while James was talking, you can't do this with Snapcaster Mage, unfortunately. It doesn't work.
Yes, I mean, it is true that you can't play Snapcaster Mage and flash this back sacrificing Snapcaster Mage.
That would have been cool, but too broken for Modern and Legacy and maybe Vintage.
But at the same time, Snapcaster is still a great creature to have in your deck with this, because it is a cheap creature that gave you value already. This is phenomenal if you have a Snapcaster Mage lying around in play.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like ETB effects are the best with this, but blue doesn't have as many. Like Spellseeker, once you got your value out of that, you'll find that going. I'm looking down my cube, and it is Spellseeker. Snapcaster Mages for ETB effects that aren't Thassa's Oracle. So
Thieving Skydiver. Kind of a thing. But yes, you're not wrong. Also, just worth noting with playing this with other cards in this set, you can't sacrifice Devoid creatures to this effect.
Yes, very true. Yes, that'll definitely happen at pre-release, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right, talking of Devoid, we have another ugly lad to talk about. James, you want to take it away with our next Eldrazi?
Yeah, next up we have Hope Ender Coatl. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 creature Eldrazi snake. It has Devoid, Flash, and Flying for a good spread of keywords. And when you cast this spell, not when it enters the battlefield, when you cast this spell, counter target spell an opponent controls unless they pay 1. I think you can do better than this. I don't know. I get that threats that get value on the way in are good, but the times this works, it will be phenomenal. But the thing is, it's a decent chunk of mana to leave up, and there's just a good amount of turns they're not going to play into this, and it's a pretty unimpressive body if you play it without countering anything. Like, I'm not saying it's like unplayable in like low power level cubes, but I don't see it. I don't see it in the like super streamlined powerful cubes.
No, I think that's fair. No, this is another one very much for Peasant, I think, because like at Peasant rate wise, I have a Peasant cube up now, and the rate is 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer.
I mean, that's true. I guess you just see it as an upside, right?
Yeah.
Because it is weird, but it is also true that the actual counter magic in Peasant Cube is phenomenal. Like all the good counter spells are
pretty much
uncommon or common. Yeah. But yes, I guess as a threat, it is a lot more legit there.
No, definitely. As a card, I don't see this for higher power level cubes, but I think in Peasant, I think this is actually pretty solid. I'm kind of just going through. I'll kind of rattle off some that kind of I've seen. So like Frost Trickster that taps stuff down, but it's a 3 mana 2/2 flyer. We have like
Who's building that cube, but we can do better than Frost Trickster. Just putting it out there.
Not at Peasant, James. At Peasant, I think this is.
Have you seen commons they print now?
Yeah, this is a Modern Horizons. Like this is a
Angelic Overseers, or like Cloudkid Seers, like 3 mana 2-powered flyer. The Cloudkid Seers blue. And it's like a 3 mana 2-powered flyer that draws you a card.
No, but this has flash and an extra toughness. Sure. And Devoid, James, for not being able to pitch it to your force of will. I don't know. Okay.
This is all true. No, I think it's fine. I think it is fine in Peasant Cube. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, fair. All right, let's move on to another common now. Next up, we have Sink into Stupor. This is 1 blue for an instant to return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. But wait, there's more. It's a modal double face card. It can also be played as a land. It can be played as Sulphuric Springs. It enters the battlefield. As it enters the battlefield, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for a blue. I think in Cube and in a deck that wants to run this is really solid. I feel this is a very good tempo play. It's a very good tempo card. I don't think this is a control card. I think because it's not a hard counter spell, it's putting it back into the hand. You're delaying them the turn. It's kind of that knife edge that you find yourself in tempo decks, kind of that kind of thing. But in those decks, the fact that it can also be a land that importantly comes into play untapped, I think is actually pretty good. So that will mean you will need to be supporting blue tempo in some way in your cube. Like I know Ninjas was a thing for a while. Any kind of deck that loves a remand and attacking with some creatures on like with the Malcolms that I kind of mentioned, I think is pretty good. Worth mentioning with these MDFCs is that they do go up in value a little bit if you are running something like Field of the Dead in your cube. Because you just need lands with different names, and this is a land with a different name when it comes to it. The other fun part is Goblin Charbelcher. If you have that, then you kind of want to run as many of these MDFCs as possible. That is definitely a build around I've seen people do, or I think there was a build around Arena Cube where they had that, and that actually looked really, really fun. If you don't have those, then the issue might just be similar to some other cards we've said in the set, kind of just finding a slot for this. But it's a very good card. As I mentioned, it's also an uncommon. And in Peasant Cube, I'd also probably just snap this up. Peasant's getting a lot from this set already, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we say it's a tempo play, and I agree that's how the spell reads, but I'm still not cutting this from a control deck. I'm still playing this over an island, I think, most of the time. Because even, if you can use this to keep your Planeswalker alive, right? You can use it to disrupt their combo. I think it's pretty solid. I'm not saying I agree. It's there might be one that you just don't find a slot for, but I think it's a pretty solid card. And I think there are relatively few blue decks where if I had this in my pool, I wouldn't run it.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think it shines a bit more in a tempo deck, but yeah, you are right. If you have 3 mana and you need to stop something for a turn, you will use this to do it. So yeah, that does make sense.
All right, next up we have Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. This is a single blue mana for a 0/3 legendary creature Moonfolk Wizard with flying. When Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student attacks, you investigate. And whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile Tamiyo, then return her to the battlefield transformed under their owner's control. And it flips into Tamiyo Seasoned Scholar. This is a legendary Planeswalker Tamiyo. Starts with just 2 loyalty, but you can +2 for until your next turn. Whenever a creature attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, it gets -1/-0 until end of turn. So not a super impactful plus. But for -3, you can return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a green card, you add 1 mana of any color. And for -7, you draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your library rounded up, and get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. This card has certainly very high upside. I think compared to, for example, the Ajani we saw earlier, I think you have to do a little bit more work to enable this. if your plan is attack with it 3 times, then take a turn off to crack 3 clues, or 2 clues, I guess. 2 clues. You've got your draw step as well. But even like crack 2 clues to flip this, that feels a little bit slow to me.
That's a really bad turn 4.
Yeah. But but you can also just cast a brainstorm. You can, or you cast 2 cantrips. You cast a charter course, and this flips. And then the Planeswalker is not one that runs away with the game super quickly, but if you get it flipped really early, it's going to put in a lot of work for you. And you invested just 1 mana in this card, And it's also just not the worst thing to, you play this on turn 1, and you just keep hitting with it and getting and investigating. Like, it's an 0-3 flyer. They're not going to be blocking it and killing it for a while. And then you're just accumulating these artifacts, these clues. Maybe you have some artifact synergies. You've got like an Urza or an Academy or something. Or your plan is just, I'm going to 1-for-1 for ages, and then later on in the game, I'm going to have a bunch of clues sitting around which I can crack to draw cards, and I'll just win the late game because I have this massive card advantage from just that upfront 1 mana investment. And it's even like a pretty passable blocker against aggro, Like, I mean, not great, but like, blocks fair value. That's fine. And yeah, if you do get it flipped early, you can plus it a couple of times and try and get to that -7, or you can just like get a regrowth basically like every other turn. And it seems solid to me. I'm interested in trying this in Powered Cube, I think.
So I'm actually furious at this card, James.
Go on.
Because I now can no longer justify running hard evidence in my cube. Because this is basically just hard evidence with flying. Like,
this is better than hard evidence, yeah.
That's a single blue for a sorcery that makes an 0-3 crab and you investigate, which I love as a card. It just fills so many little holes. But like, so if I'm honest with you, I'm not super fussed by the backside of this card. I'm just thinking this. If I'm honest with you, I'm just thinking of this as the best Thraben Inspector ever printed. It is a roadblock for it's a roadblock for the aggro decks, and it gives you a bit of card advantage. It gives you that artifact, as you mentioned, to tinker away, that kind of thing. Like it's just going to be it's 1 mana. It's like so innocuous, and kind of like if you're in a position later where you can flip it, awesome. You now have an active Planeswalker. But I think it's kind of very much like if I'm honest with you, yeah, I think I'm putting this in as a direct replacement to hard evidence.
Sure.
It's probably good enough at that role to just be fine, and then the backside is bonus basically.
I mean, I guess I do think this is a lot better than hard evidence. I guess the upside of
hard
evidence is that I'm trying to stand up for a crab here, Daniel.
I love the crab. Yeah. This doesn't trigger Sahili. This doesn't trigger Sahili to be a Artificer. So
you don't get the clue the turn you play it. Also,
that's true.
It's attack. So like, if it is like you play it and then need to block with it because they're beating you down so hard, then you don't get an attack, then you don't get your clue. But yeah, it's 1 mana. You can probably find at least 1 turn to attack. Yeah. No, I get what you mean about the Planeswalker. Like, it basically doesn't do anything the turn it comes down, right? You need to plus once before you get your regrowth. But if it seems like, it's not every matchup that they're beating you down super hard. And if you can just like flip this pretty early, which seems kind of achievable, and then it's just going to be like threatening. It can just sit there and accumulate you a bunch more value, which is kind of nice. But yeah, no, I'm kind of also just down for the make a bunch of clues mode.
Yeah. It's just so cheap. It's like it's 1 mana. Like it's so efficient. You're going to get your value out of this. I spent too much time focusing on the back half of this card, and just the front half is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Right, next up we have another 1-drop. Next up we have Triton Wavebreaker. This is a single blue for a 1/1 enchantment creature Merfolk Wizard. It has Bestow for 1 blue, and as long as Triton Wavebreaker is a creature, it has Prowess. Enchanted creature, so when you bestow it onto something, gets +1/+1, and also has Prowess. This is also probably another one for Peasant, if I'm honest with you, but I do like the idea of giving another creature Prowess, or even potentially a creature double Prowess. So stick this on a Monetary Mentor on turn 2, and you just will kill people. yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen boggles in cubes, in peasant cubes, and again, they have built-in protection. That with this will just kill people. I do think you are trying to put this on a creature. You're not really running this out by itself. You are trying to buff up a creature, maybe with evasion, that kind of thing. But yeah, as you mentioned previously, kind of like if you have this on a creature, it means your opponent needs 2 removal spells to get rid of this end effect. So yeah, 2 mana for that effect to bestow it, I think is just very solid.
I think it's fine. The issue I have is just that I don't find the cheap prowess creatures deck comes together all that well in most cubes. I think the issue I have with it, right, is for that blue-red prowessy style of deck to really work, what you need is a bunch of cheap cantrips. Because if you're just playing like burn spells, you run out of cards very quickly. And the thing is, everyone else wants your cantrips. It's not like you're just getting all the cantrips because you're the blue-red spells guy. Every other blue player also wants the cantrips. And I find it's kind of tough to get enough of them for this style of deck to like work consistently, because the threats do tend to be like a little underpowered when you're not really doing the thing. And like when they just kill the creatures, then it's, your deck kind of just doesn't do that much. Which I guess this does kind of help with, actually, with the bestow. I guess it can be talked about.
Yeah. It's two removal spells. And also, at lower powered level cubes, there is less of a, not penchant, like there's less of a guarantee that you're going to have like 3 or 4 blue drafters. People, like, the lower power level you go, the more kind of, or from my experience anyway, the more spread out and even the color pairs and like people in different archetypes tend to be. You don't have like this density of just powerful cards in one color, so therefore everyone wants to be that color, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is true. That is true, for sure. Okay, next up we have Volatile Stormdrake. This is 1 blue for a 3/2 creature Drake. It has flying and hexproof from activated and triggered abilities. Also has, when Volatile Stormdrake enters the battlefield, exchange control of Volatile Stormdrake and target creature and opponent controls. If you do, you get 4 energy. Then sacrifice that creature unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana cost. I love Gilded Drake. It's like one of my favorite cards in Magic. It's so much fun. This is quite a lot worse. But also I looked it up and Gilded Drake costs like $300. And this one
Commander's really done one on Gilded Drake. Yeah.
Gilded Drake makes a whole box of MH3 look cheap. So that's a pretty good reason to consider this. But they have kind of made it less fun than Gilded Drake, you can't take the really big creature, and that's unfortunate. But also the hexproof from activated and triggered abilities thing.
Does that mean you can't do like the flicker wisp stuff with it?
Exactly.
That's
And that's the fun bit, And like Teferi Time Raveler, bounce your Gilded Drake, steal another one of your thing. Parallax Wave out for Gilded Drake. It comes back, get the other creature that came back in with Wave, Those are the times when Gilded Drake feels like a really powerful card. And this kind of takes away most of those possibilities. Like, yeah, you can spend like a bounce spell from your hand still to bounce it. And that is good, right? Like you Brazen Borrower this, you're feeling very good about it. But I think it just kind of removes the best parts of that card. I think it's still fine, right? Like, if you play this and steal their like questing beast or whatever, that is good for you. And obviously it does get better if you have other energy stuff in your deck, both because you can potentially steal a bigger thing, or if you steal a smaller thing, maybe you can use the energy that's left over. But like, there's still the issue of like, a 3/2 flyer is a pretty legit creature you're giving them. And the creature you get has to be a lot better because you used a card and 2 mana. From this text, it's not if I play this and they don't have any creatures, I just get to keep it, right?
So I don't know. I'm looking at Gilded Drake, and it has this ability still resolves if the target becomes illegal. I don't know what that means. Like,
yeah. So Gilded Drake, if you play it on an empty board, it just dies, right?
Oh, yes, because it has or sacrifice it. Yeah. So if
whereas this, you can just run this out on turn 2 if they don't have a creature. That makes it a decent amount better.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you just have a 2-mana flying hexproof from activating triggered abilities. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Don't hate that. Does that mean it's a sideboard card for when you're on the play, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those that, if you don't play it on turn 2, you kind of... Yeah, it has a lot of different modes, this card, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. I don't know, if you don't want to put Gilded Drake in your cube because it's stupidly expensive, then I'd be kind of interested to try it.
Like it's definitely an interesting one. Like I think because they have taken away the really fun things that you can do with this, I think it probably means that it's probably not one for cube, but like good creatures are just getting cheaper. Like you mentioned questing base. There's just so many actually good 4-drops nowadays that maybe this does just get enough creatures. Like I'm just looking at my green 3s, and there's so many 4/4s in there now that that is trading up. Like, yes, is it worth it for the mana in the card? That is something you need to consider. Like, my gut with this is you should, if you want this kind of effect, if you want to do the cool thing with Flicker Wisp or the thing with Show and Tell, because that's also quite funny. You cast Show and Tell, and you have a Gilded Drake, you steal their thing, that kind of thing. Like, if you want to do that stuff with Gilded Drake, just proxy Gilded Drake. Like, that's kind of where I am with this one. Like, there's a lot of cards in this set which are kind of throwbacks or effectively modern takes with energy of reserve list reserve list and powerful reserve list cards. Some of them land. I think this one misses, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just one other note, which I don't think changes a lot of that, but you can take something bigger than the amount of energy you're going to have, and it will just be sacrificed, which obviously kind of sucks. Yeah. But if they have a Gristlebrand, you can use this as a sort of beast within type thing. Yeah. You kill their Gristlebrand, and they have a 3/2 flyer, which is bad for you, but
it's better than a Gristlebrand. Yeah. To be fair,
in an emergency, you'll do that.
No, exactly. I don't think that's nothing, but I think that would be a cool backup if I wanted to play, if I was excited to play about the card in the first place, if I'm honest with you. And because it doesn't let me do the cool thing that will make me feel smart with Flicker Wisp and the things you mentioned, I'm a bit yeah, that is cool. And I think that's kind of actually what it'll be useful in Commander and stuff. Either steal someone's Commander or just use it. Formats where Beast Within is really good, then crack on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, you know what we can do instead of including this card, right? We play Gilded Drake anyway, and then we play the Felia, the dog that flickers stuff in and out, and you attack and flick your Gilded Drake and get it back every time. You just keep doing that.
That's pretty good. Yeah. You just steal they're bored every turn. That's So that's what I want to do. That is cool. Volatile Storm Drake. Not so much.
Exactly. This is one of the worst cases of why won't wizards let me have fun?
Yeah. Is this as bad as Once a Turn, James? Where do we land on it?
It's up there.
Well, all right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Do remember to follow the podcast and give us a 5-star review, because next time we're going to be looking at black and red. James, thank you as always.
Always a pleasure.
Marvelous. If there's any cards in these colors that we've missed, let us know on Twitter at PowerfulMTG, or if you're watching on YouTube, let us know down in the comments. It just leaves me to thank you all very much for listening. It's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and until next time, we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.